She woke up early, as she always did, before the first rays of the sun could stretch across the rooftops of her small, quiet neighborhood. Her small home was nothing more than a few rooms patched together, walls that had seen better days and a floor that creaked under every step. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and old dust, but it was her world, the place she called home. Every morning she would sweep the floors, tidy the corners, and prepare for the day. Though each day was much the same as the last, life had not been gentle with her. It had been harsh, unforgiving, and full of small struggles that weighed on her shoulders like invisible stones. She had learned to move through life quietly, without complaint. People often walked past her without a second glance, too busy with their own lives to notice her existence. To them, she was just a poor woman, a simple figure in tattered clothes, carrying a basket of vegetables or bags of laundry. Yet behind her calm demeanor, she carried a deep reservoir of thoughts, memories, and feelings that she rarely shared. Her hands, rough from years of work, held a secret, one that even she sometimes doubted could ever matter to anyone else. From a young age, she had discovered music. It was a quiet discovery, one made in moments of solitude when the world seemed too loud or too unfair. Her father had owned a small piano, old and slightly out of tune, tucked into the corner of their living room. He could not play, but he would hum and tap the keys while she listened. She started to press the keys herself, learning by trial and error, feeling the vibrations of the notes under her fingers. She would stay there for hours, teaching herself the patterns, the emotions, the way music could tell a story without words. It was her escape, her secret sanctuary. Time had not been kind to her family. Her father passed away when she was young, and her mother struggled to keep the family together. The piano had long been sold to cover bills and small debts. By the time she was a teenager, she had to work to support her family. Dreams of music were tucked away, hidden beneath the weight of responsibilities, like a treasure locked in a chest and forgotten. Life demanded practicality over passion, survival over dreams. She learned to cook, clean, mend clothes, carry water, and help neighbors with odd jobs. Every day she moved through the motions, never stopping to think if the world would ever notice her hidden talent. Despite the hardship, she never let go of music completely. In the quiet moments when she could steal a few minutes alone, she would hum tunes to herself, tap rhythms on the kitchen counter, or use the old, broken instruments she could find at second-hand shops. They were never perfect, but they allowed her to keep the spark alive. She believed that one day, perhaps she would play again, but she never expected that day to come soon or that anyone would ever hear her play. People in her neighborhood knew her only as the hard-working woman who helped where she could. Children would follow her sometimes, curious about her gentle smile and patient ways. She would sometimes teach them simple songs or hum to them as she worked. Her presence was calm and comforting, even if her past and her talents were hidden. Yet she always felt a strange distance from others, as if the world existed on one side of a wall and she on the other. No one saw the depth inside her, the richness of experiences, the quiet reservoir of hope and imagination that flowed through her mind. She carried herself with humility, but there was a strength in her that people rarely noticed. She had faced hunger, loss, ridicule, and neglect. Yet she continued to rise each day and meet the world with a small, unassuming dignity. She did not complain. She did not demand attention, and she did not ask for recognition. Life had taught her that survival mattered more than applause. But the music inside her, the rhythm of her soul, continued to beat quietly, waiting, patient. One morning, she went about her usual routine, collecting water from the well and carrying it back to her home. Feeling the strain in her arms and back, the streets were quiet, the sun only just beginning to rise. She passed by shops opening for the day, people hurrying to their work, voices rising in small bursts of chatter. She waved to a few familiar faces, and they waved back, polite but distant. She was accustomed to this. The way the world moved on without noticing her existence, her thoughts drifted back to her father and the first time. She played the piano in their small living room. She could remember the feel of the keys under her fingers, the thrill of making something beautiful out of nothing, the way her mother had smiled at her, proud and amazed. Those memories were bittersweet. They reminded her of joy, but also of loss, of the life that could have been. Yet she held onto them tightly, like a lifeline. They were proof that she could create something extraordinary, even if no one else ever saw it, as she finished her morning chores. She noticed a commotion near the market square. People were gathering around, some laughing, some pointing. She moved closer, curious but cautious. There was an old piano in the center of the crowd, battered and broken, missing keys, strings snapped, its frame chipped and worn. A few people were daring someone to play it, joking about how no one could make music from such a wreck. She felt a strange pull toward it, an old, familiar spark flickering inside her chest. It was the same feeling she had known as a child, the excitement of possibility, the quiet thrill of creation. She hesitated, unsure if she should approach. She had not played in years, and this piano was far from perfect. People were mocking the idea, waiting for someone to fail. Her heart pounded in her chest. Part of her wanted to walk away, to disappear back into the shadows where she was safe and unseen. But another part, the part that had never truly left, whispered that this was her moment, her chance to touch the world. Even if just for a fleeting moment, with trembling hands she stepped forward. The crowd noticed her, and there were a few chuckles and whispers. They did not expect anything from her, seeing only a poor, quiet woman approaching a broken instrument. She ignored them, focusing only on the piano in front of her. She rested her hands on the keys, feeling their rough edges, the uneven spacing, the signs of years of neglect. She closed her eyes, letting her memories guide her fingers. And then, softly, she pressed a key. A harsh, broken note rang out. It was not beautiful, but it was a beginning. And for her, that beginning was everything. As she played the first few notes, she adjusted her fingers, finding the keys that still produced sound, the ones that could carry a melody. She hummed to herself, creating a rhythm that matched the broken piano's imperfect voice. People started to quiet down, curious despite themselves. What was this woman doing? Could she really make something of this ruined instrument? Her hands moved with a familiarity born of years of hidden practice, years of dreaming in silence. Every note carried a fragment of her life, a story of struggle and resilience, hope and endurance. The morning air was filled with a strange, delicate sound, a music that seemed impossible from such a battered piano. The crowd grew still, drawn in by the unexpected beauty, the raw emotion pouring from her fingers. She did not look at them. She did not seek their approval. She played because it was part of her, because it was who she was. And in that moment, she was no longer just a poor woman in tattered clothes. She was an artist, a creator, a person whose talent had survived every hardship thrown her way. The world around her seemed to hold its breath. For the first time in a long time, she felt sentient for her struggles. Not for her poverty, not for the quiet, unnoticed life she had led, but for her skill, her passion, her humanity. And though she did not yet know what would happen next, she knew that something had shifted. Something invisible but powerful had awakened in her. A reminder that no matter how broken the world may seem, beauty could still emerge. Even from the most unlikely places. The morning had grown warmer. The sun climbing slowly into the sky, and yet she did not notice it. She was entirely focused on the broken piano in front of her. Its surface was scratched and faded, the wood chipped and worn. A few keys were missing entirely, some pressed down too hard, others sticking stubbornly in place. She could hear the faint creak of the frame as she gently shifted her weight in the old wooden chair. It was an instrument that had been neglected, almost abandoned. Much like she herself had sometimes felt in her life, the crowd that had gathered was no longer laughing outright, though the occasional whisper or murmur betrayed their curiosity. Some were confused, some were skeptical. They had not expected this poor woman to even try, and now she was sitting there, quiet and poised, preparing to coax music from an instrument that seemed beyond repair. She felt the weight of their eyes on her, but she tried not to think about them. Instead, she focused on her hands, on the memory of the first time she had touched piano keys, on the sound that came when she pressed them just right. She closed her eyes, letting her mind drift to those old moments of joy, of discovery. of endless afternoons spent learning melodies by ear. When she pressed the first key again, the sound was rough, a little jagged, but it was a note that existed. A note that could be shaped into something meaningful. She moved to the next, searching, testing, feeling her way across the damaged instrument. Slowly, theodissonant tones began to form patterns, rhythms that made sense. In her memory and imagination, she hummed softly to herself, barely audible, and it helped guide her fingers. She adapted, changed the song she had in her mind to fit the keys that still worked. Her music became a conversation between her and the piano, dialogue of patience and intuition. At first, the crowd shifted uneasily. They were unsure how to react. Some whispered to each other, saying, "The woman might only make a fool of herself." Others began to feel a strange curiosity, leaning forward slightly, ears straining to catch the notes. Slowly, the sound started to rise above the murmurs. The music had a strange beauty, raw and imperfect, but alive. It carried emotion that the piano itself could not convey without her hands. The broken instrument became an extension of her spirit, a channel for her years of hidden practice and deep emotion. She remembered her childhood again. The first time she had realized that music could express things words could not. How it could carry sadness, hope, joy, and longing, all at the same time. Those lessons learned in a quiet living room so many years ago came flooding back. She used every small skill she had ever learned, adjusting her movements to the piano's imperfections. She pressed some keys lightly, avoided others entirely, and sometimes struck a series of keys in quick succession to compensate for the missing sounds. It was a delicate balance, a test of patience and instinct, but she was used to challenges, used to finding solutions where none seemed possible. A few children had gathered near the edges of the crowd. Their eyes were wide with wonder, and they whispered to each other excitedly. They could not understand all the music, but they could feel it. There was something magical about the way she played, the way she seemed to communicate directly with the instrument, as if it were alive and listening to her every thought. Even the adults began to pause, noticing the care and skill in her movements, the rhythm in her fingers, the emotion in every note. The woman felt a small thrill inside her, a spark of confidence she had not felt in years. She began to play with more assurance, letting her memory guide her hands. She remembered songs she had played as a child, melodies that had brought her joy, and even the ones she had made up herself, hiding them in her mind like treasures. She let her fingers move freely, adjusting on the fly, improvising where necessary, creating music that was both familiar and new. Each note seemed to ripple out, reaching the listeners in unexpected ways. Some of the crowd began to murmur in disbelief. How could this woman make such beautiful sounds from such a damaged instrument? The rough notes blended into something remarkable, almost magical. The piano's flaws no longer seemed like obstacles, but rather like part of the story, part of the music itself. She played with emotion, with feeling, with a skill that spoke louder than words. The broken keys and stubborn pedals were no match for her experience and creativity. Her mind drifted briefly to the life she had lived. The years of struggle, of poverty, of people judging her based on appearance and circumstance, all of it seemed to pour into the music. Each chord she struck carried a fragment of her life, every pause a reflection of her endurance. She felt a release, as if the music were not only telling her story, but also lifting the weight she had carried for so long. For a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. There was only her, the piano, and the music flowing between them. The crowd could not look away. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the raw, authentic emotion of the performance. Others were silent, trying to comprehend the skill they were witnessing. No one spoke, no one laughed. They were captivated, drawn into the moment, unable to deny the talent that had emerged from the most unexpected place. The woman did not seek recognition, yet it found her anyway. Slipping into the space between her notes and the hearts of those listening, she continued to play, improvising and adapting, finding ways to make the broken piano sing. Her hands moved with precision and grace, drawing on years of hidden knowledge and passion. Every note seemed intentional, every rhythm deliberate, even when it danced across imperfect keys. She had learned long ago how to turn obstacles into opportunities. And now, before this small audience, she demonstrated that lesson with every chord. Time seemed to stretch and bend around her performance. The sun climbed higher, but she was unaware. Her mind and body were entirely absorbed in the music, in the delicate balance of making something beautiful out of imperfection. She felt alive, more alive than she had in years, as if the act of playing had awakened a part of her soul that had slept for too long. The music flowed naturally, like a river finding its path around rocks and bends, carving beauty out of difficulty. The crowd shifted slightly, leaning closer, drawn by curiosity and then held by awe. Their earlier skepticism had faded completely. They could no longer see her as simply a poor woman. They saw a musician, an artist, someone whose talent transcended the circumstances of her life. Even the children at the edge of the crowd felt it. They watched her hands, listened to the sound, and whispered to each other, as if sharing a secret about something miraculous happening before their eyes. She paused briefly. Taking a deep breath, her eyes closed. In that small silence, the crowd noticed the intensity of her focus, the way she seemed to communicate directly with the piano. She was not performing for anyone but herself, yet everyone present felt the power of her dedication and skill. Then she began again, softly, cautiously, finding a new rhythm, a new melody, shaping the broken notes into something that made sense, something beautiful. The music was imperfect, but perfect in its truth, carrying the weight of a life lived quietly, faithfully, with hidden strength and resilience. For the woman, this moment was a revelation. She had survived years of struggle, moments of despair, the constant judgment of people who could not see beyond her circumstances. And yet here she was, transforming the broken piano into an instrument of expression, making music that touched others in ways she had never imagined. It was a small victory, but it was hers. A victory not of wealth or recognition, but of proof. Proof that her talent, her spirit, her creativity could not be diminished by poverty, by neglect, or by the harshness of life. As the final notes of her improvisation drifted into the morning air, the crowd remained still. There were no cheers, no clapping at first, only quiet reflection. People exchanged looks, silently acknowledging that they had witnessed something extraordinary. The woman opened her eyes, met the gaze of the few who had dared to doubt her, and smiled softly. She did not need their praise. She needed only the music, the piano, and the knowledge that she had honored her gift, even if for just a fleeting moment. And in that moment, something changed, not just for her, but for everyone watching. The broken piano, the skeptical crowd, the small morning gathering, all of it became part of a story about resilience, talent, and the quiet power of perseverance. She had proven, without saying a word, that beauty could emerge from hardship, that strength often lies hidden in unexpected places, and that the human spirit, once awakened, could turn even a broken instrument into a source of wonder. The crowd had grown still, the morning air thick with anticipation. People whispered quietly among themselves, unsure what to expect next. The woman sat before the broken piano, her hands resting lightly on the keys, taking a deep breath as if gathering strength from within. She had already shown a glimpse of her skill, but she knew that she could go further. She closed her eyes and let the memory of her childhood guide her fingers once again. The music was not just a performance. It was a conversation with herself, with her past. And with the instrument that had been waiting for her touch, her hands moved with growing confidence. She played slowly at first, testing the keys, feeling the vibrations under her fingertips adjusting to the piano's imperfections. Each note carried a story, each chord a fragment of her life. The rough edges of the broken keys no longer mattered. They became part of the music. The sound was raw and unpolished, yet it carried emotion, and the crowd began to lean in, drawn to the authenticity of what they were witnessing. Memories flooded her mind. She remembered her father, who had humbly tapped out rhythms on the old piano when she was a child. She remembered the first time she had played a melody that made her mother smile. She remembered the long, lonely afternoons spent practicing in secret, shaping music from silence. Every memory became a note, every feeling a rhythm. Her life's joys and sorrows intertwined with the melody, making it more than just music. It became a reflection of her soul. The audience was captivated. People who had initially doubted her skill were now silent, their eyes fixed on her hands as they danced across the keys. Children sat on the edge of their seats, wide-eyed and mesmerized. Even the adults, hardened by life, could not help but be moved. The music carried a power that transcended the broken instrument, speaking directly to their hearts. It was impossible to ignore the skill, the emotion, and the authenticity she poured into every note. As she played, her confidence grew. She allowed herself to improvise, to let her feelings dictate the melody. The broken piano, once a symbol of ridicule, became a vessel for her expression. She adapted her fingers to the keys that worked, found rhythms that harmonized with the piano's flaws, and created sounds that seemed impossible from such a battered instrument. The music swelled and receded, soft and tender in some moments, strong and commanding in others. It was as if the piano itself had come alive, responding to her touch with a depth and richness that astonished everyone present. She could feel the energy of the crowd. She did not play for them. Their reactions were subtle, a gasp here, a quiet murmur there, but they fed back into her performance. She felt connected, not just to the piano and her memories, but to the people who were silently witnessing her gift. Music had always been her refuge, her escape, her secret. Now it had become a bridge between her world and theirs, a way to communicate without words. Time seemed to stretch and blur. The sun climbed higher, but she did not notice it. She was lost in the music, in the rhythm, in the flow of emotions that poured from her fingers. Each note was deliberate, each pause intentional, yet the music felt spontaneous, alive. She was creating in the moment, shaping sound into something that no one had expected, something that defied the limitations of the broken piano. Her mind wandered briefly to the life she had lived. She remembered the hardships, the long days of work, the quiet humiliation of being overlooked and underestimated. She remembered the nights spent in solitude, practicing on makeshift instruments, dreaming of a day when her talent might be recognized. All of it flowed into the music, giving it depth and authenticity. It was not just a display of skill. It was a testament to resilience, to perseverance, the quiet strength of a woman who had never given up despite the odds. The crowd's reactions became more pronounced. Some people had tears in their eyes, touched by the emotion and truth in her playing. Others were silent, overwhelmed by the realization that they had misjudged her. Children leaned closer, listening intently, sensing the magic of the moment, even if they could not fully understand it. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the unexpected beauty that had emerged from the broken piano and the woman who played it. She allowed herself a small smile, though her eyes remained closed. She felt a sense of liberation, a release from years of hidden struggle and unspoken dreams. The music had become a channel for her emotions, a way to express what words could not. She played with a freedom she had never experienced before, letting the melody rise and fall, carrying the weight of her experiences and the hope for a future she could not yet see. As the melody continued, she experimented with dynamics, shifting from soft, tender passages to powerful, commanding chords. The broken piano responded in unexpected ways, its flaws adding character and texture to the music. She adapted, improvising to create harmony where there was discord, finding beauty in imperfection. The audience could not look away, captivated by the skill, the emotion, and the courage it took to play so fearless. Her mind drifted to the lessons she had learned from life. She had learned patience, resilience, and the ability to find solutions where others saw only obstacles. She applied these lessons to the music, turning the piano's limitations into opportunities for creativity. Each note was a choice, each chord a reflection of her ingenuity and determination. The broken instrument became a symbol not of failure, but of possibility, a reminder that beauty could emerge even from difficult circumstances. The crowd began to sense the depth of her performance. The music was no longer just a series of notes. It was a story a journey through a life marked by struggle and perseverance. People who had come to mock or doubt her now watched in awe, realizing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The woman's talent, once hidden and overlooked, was now undeniable. Shining brightly through the imperfections of the piano and the unassuming exterior of the player, she continued to play, letting the music flow naturally, guided by her emotions and memories. The broken piano sang in a way no one had thought possible, its flaws transformed into elements of expression. The audience was completely absorbed, caught up in the moment, feeling the music as much as they heard it. The woman's performance became a shared experience, connecting her to those around her in a profound and unspoken way. As the final notes approached, she slowed her playing, allowing the music to fade gently. The silence that followed was filled with emotion, a collective recognition of the beauty and skill that had just been revealed. People exchanged glances, some with tears in their eyes, others with expressions of awe and respect. The woman opened her eyes, meeting the gaze of the crowd, and allowed herself a small, quiet smile. She had shared a part of herself, and in doing so, she had touched the hearts of everyone present. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The broken piano, the curious and skeptical crowd, the warm morning sun, all of it became part of a story about resilience, talent, and the hidden power of the human spirit. The woman had proven without words that skill and beauty could exist even in the most overlooked lives, and that perseverance and dedication could transform obstacles into opportunities. She rose slowly from the piano, feeling a sense of fulfillment and strength that she had not known in years, ready to continue her journey, whatever it might hold next. The morning air felt charged as she returned to the piano, her hands hovering lightly above the keys. She could sense the eyes of the crowd, but she no longer worried about their judgment. She had already proven, in her own quiet way, that she could make the broken piano sing, yet something inside her urged her to continue, to explore the depths of the music she had kept hidden for so long. She closed her eyes and allowed her fingers to fall onto the keys with a gentle but determined touch. The piano responded, producing tones that were imperfect but full of character, a reflection of the woman herself. The crowd was silent, holding their breath. Some leaned forward, captivated by the unexpected beauty. There were no whispers now, no laughter, only quiet anticipation. The woman's playing was different this time, more confident, more expressive. She allowed herself to be guided by emotion, letting her life experiences dictate the flow of the melody. Each note carried a fragment of her story, years of struggle, moments of joy, and long periods of quiet endurance. The music was not just sound. It was a living testament to her journey. She shifted her hands across the keys, adapting to the broken ones, finding new paths where the piano seemed to resist. The instrument, once a source of mockery, now became her partner, responding to her touch with unexpected harmony. The rough edges of the keys added texture, creating a sound that was raw and authentic. The crowd felt it too, though they did not fully understand. Something extraordinary was happening, and everyone present sensed it. This was no ordinary performance. It was a revelation. Her mind drifted to memories of childhood, of a small living room where she first discovered music. She remembered her father's gentle encouragement, the thrill of learning a melody, and the secret hours spent practicing when no one was watching. Those memories guided her fingers, shaping the music with an intimacy that could not be taught. Each chord was deliberate, yet it carried the spontaneity of life itself. The broken piano became an extension of her emotions, a conduit through which she could share her story without words. The crowd could feel the intensity of her playing. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the authenticity and passion she displayed. Others were silent, caught off guard by the realization that they had underestimated her. Children watched in awe, sensing the magic without fully understanding it. Even those who had come to mock or doubt her were now captivated, unable to look away. The music spoke to them directly. Bypassing skepticism and reaching something deeper within, she allowed herself to explore new rhythms, experimenting with dynamics and tempo. The broken piano required patience and adaptability, and she navigated it with skill and creativity. Every note was a choice, every pause a deliberate moment of expression. The imperfections of the instrument no longer hindered her. They inspired her. She found beauty where others would see only flaws, transforming limitations into opportunities. Her performance was a demonstration of resilience, ingenuity, and the quiet strength of a woman who had faced life's hardships with dignity. The morning sun cast long shadows across the crowd, yet no one moved. They were entranced, caught in the flow of music that seemed to transcend the ordinary. The woman's fingers danced across the keys, producing melodies that were at once familiar and new. She shifted between soft, delicate passages and powerful, commanding chords, guiding the audience through a journey of emotion. The broken piano sang in a way that no one had thought possible, its flaws adding depth and character to the performance. She thought of the years she had spent unnoticed, the moments of quiet struggle, the times she had been overlooked and underestimated. All of that had led to this moment, a culmination of experience, skill, and determination. The music was a reflection of her life, a narrative told through sound. Each note carried meaning, each chord resonated with emotion. She played not for recognition, not for applause, but because it was part of who she was. The piano was her voice, and she used it to speak the truth of her existence. The audience began to react, though subtly at first. A few hands twitched, an involuntary gesture of admiration. Some faces softened, tears forming in the corners of eyes. Even those who had approached with doubt could not deny the talent before them. The woman's performance was a revelation, a reminder that true skill and beauty often exist in places we least expect. She had taken a broken instrument and turned it into something extraordinary. Just as she had navigated a difficult life and emerged with strength and resilience. As she continued, she allowed herself to be guided purely by emotion. The music rose and fell, ebbing and flowing like the tide, carrying the audience along with it. Each note was infused with years of experience, each melody a testament to patience and perseverance. The broken piano, once a symbol of neglect and mockery, now resonated with life, carrying her story to everyone present. The audience was no longer observers. They were participants, feeling the emotion and power of the music as if it were part of their own lives. She paused briefly, letting a single sustained note linger in the air. The silence that followed was profound, filled with awe and reflection. People exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the talent and courage they had witnessed. The woman opened her eyes and looked at the crowd, a gentle smile on her face. She did not need applause. The connection, the shared experience, was enough. She had communicated without words, shared her story through music, and in doing so, had earned the respect and admiration of everyone around her. The morning wore on, but the energy remained. She continued to play, exploring new melodies, improvising, and adapting to the broken piano's quirks. The audience remained captivated, fully immersed in the performance. Children sat wide-eyed, adults watched in silence, and even the most skeptical were transformed by the music. The woman's skill and emotional depth were undeniable. The broken piano had become a symbol of possibility, creativity, and resilience. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The years of struggle, the hidden talent, the quiet perseverance, all of it culminated in this moment. The music was more than a performance. It was a testament to the human spirit, a reminder that beauty and skill can emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. The broken piano, once a source of ridicule, had been transformed by her hands into an instrument of expression, carrying her story to everyone present as the final notes lingered in the air. The crowd remained silent, caught in the aftermath of what they had witnessed. Some had tears in their eyes. Others wore expressions of awe and respect. The woman rose from the piano slowly, feeling a sense of fulfillment and strength. She had shared a part of herself, revealed her hidden talent, and touched the hearts of those around her. The experience was transformative, both for her and for the audience, leaving an imprint that would not be forgotten in that quiet moment. The broken piano, the attentive crowd, and the rising sun became part of a story about resilience, talent, and the hidden power of the human spirit. The woman had shown that skill and beauty can exist even in overlooked lives, and that Perseverance and creativity can turn obstacles into opportunities. Her performance was a reminder that true artistry is not measured by the perfection of tools or circumstances, but by the depth of expression and the courage to share one's voice. She walked away from the piano with quiet dignity, her spirit lifted, ready to face whatever the world might bring next. The air was heavy with silence as the last notes faded from the broken piano. The woman's hands rested lightly on the keys, trembling slightly from the intensity of the performance. She opened her eyes slowly and looked around, taking in the faces of the crowd. There were expressions she had never expected to see: astonishment, respect, awe, even shame. People who had mocked her earlier now stood quietly, unable to hide their admiration. The children at the edges of the gathering were wide-eyed, whispering to one another about the magic they had just witnessed. She felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, a deep knowing that she had shared something powerful, something real, and it had touched the hearts of everyone there. She rose from the chair, the creaking sound of the piano filling the quiet space. She did not rush, did not turn to face the crowd directly, but walked slowly, almost ceremoniously, as if acknowledging the moment in her own way. The people were still silent, some staring, some still processing what they had seen. The woman's skill had transcended the broken instrument, the tattered clothes, the poverty that had once defined her. In that moment, she was no longer just a poor woman playing a ruined piano. She was an artist, a creator, someone who had transformed hardship into beauty. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. "Did you see that?" One person murmured to another, "How can she do that?" Someone else whispered. These soft voices grew slowly, a chorus of amazement and admiration that seemed to sweep over the gathering. People turned to one another, pointing quietly at her, nodding in silent acknowledgement of the talent that had been hidden in plain sight. There were no loud shouts or exaggerated applause, only the subtle, profound recognition of something extraordinary. Some of the adults who had doubted her before felt a quiet shame. They realized they had judged her by her appearance, her circumstances, her quiet demeanor. They had expected failure, perhaps even entertainment at her expense. Instead, they had witnessed mastery, beauty, and resilience. They shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet her gaze, yet unable to look away. The music had opened their eyes to a truth they had overlooked for too long, that talent and humanity often exists where the world least expects them. Children approached cautiously, their small feet shuffling across the ground. They looked up at her with wonder and curiosity. One timidly asked if she would play again, and she smiled softly, a gentle, assuming smile that seemed to carry years of patience, struggle, and quiet strength. She nodded ever so slightly, acknowledging them without words. It was enough. The children's faces lit up, their eyes shining with excitement and awe. They had seen someone rise above the ordinary, transform difficulty into art, and they would remember this moment for a long time. People began to speak in hushed tones, sharing their thoughts with each other. "I've never seen anything like that," one person said. "She made a broken piano sound alive," another replied. "It's not just the music," someone else added. "It's her spirit. You can feel it." The crowd slowly shifted, the murmurs growing into a collective appreciation. The woman remained calm, standing quietly, absorbing the moment without fanfare. She did not need their approval or their praise. She had already achieved something far more important. She had expressed herself fully, honestly, and without compromise. A few curious individuals approached her cautiously, wanting to understand more about the woman who had turned a broken instrument into a conduit of beauty. They asked simple questions, trying to comprehend how someone so humble could possess such skill. She answered softly, her voice unassuming, explaining that music had always been part of her life, a secret companion through years of struggle. She spoke with humility, never boasting, never exaggerating. The more she shared, the more people realized that her greatness lay not just in her skill, but in her perseverance, her patience, and her ability to rise above circumstances that might have crushed others. She reflected quietly on the journey that had brought her here. Every hardship, every moment of doubt, every hour spent practicing in secret, all of it had led to this moment. The broken piano had become a symbol of her life, flawed, overlooked, underestimated, but capable of producing something remarkable when met with care, skill, and resilience. She understood that the true beauty of her performance was not just in the music, but in the story it told about endurance, hidden talent, and the human spirit's ability to create despite adversity. The crowd's admiration continued to grow. People who had arrived with skepticism now looked at her with respect. Even those who had mocked her felt a change within themselves. The music had touched them in ways they could not articulate, moving beyond skill into the realm of pure emotion. The woman had done more than play. She had inspired, reminded, and awakened something in everyone present. Her story, woven through the notes and rhythms, was one of quiet triumph and resilience. Children sat cross-legged on the ground, leaning forward, eager to hear more. Adults stood in silence, reflecting on what they had witnessed. The atmosphere was thick with a sense of shared experience, a collective understanding that something extraordinary had occurred. The woman looked around at the faces in front of her, her eyes meeting those of a few who had doubted her most. There was no anger or resentment, only a calm acknowledgement of the truth she had revealed. Talent and spirit are not defined by circumstance, and beauty can emerge from the most unexpected places. She took a step closer to the piano, placing her hands lightly on the keys once more. A few tentative notes escaped, soft and deliberate, and the crowd leaned in. She did not need to perform grandly. The simplicity of her touch, the authenticity of her connection to the instrument, was enough. Each note carried meaning, each chord resonated with emotion. The broken piano, once a source of mockery, now sang with life, guided by her hands and her spirit.